The space station was loud and crowded. Humans, aliens, and machines moved everywhere. Shay Carter, a tired human man, sat at a corner table in a cheap bar. He wore an old leather jacket and looked like someone who had seen too many battles. His eyes were sharp, but his body was tired. He was a former soldier, now just a nobody drifting between planets. He had only a few credits left and no job in sight. Just as he lifted his drink, a shadow fell over his table. He looked up slowly. A tall alien woman stood there, wearing a dark green cloak. Her skin was pale blue, her eyes bright silver, and her face calm but serious. She spoke clearly. "Are you Shay Carter?" He raised an eyebrow. "Who's asking?" The woman sat down without waiting for permission. "My name is Velra," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I need a favor." Shay gave a tired smile. "I'm not cheap, I know," she said. Placing a data chip on the table, he looked at it and his heart skipped. That chip held more credits than he had seen in 2 years. "What's the job?" he asked, now fully alert. She looked straight into his eyes. "I need you to pretend to be my husband." Silence followed. Shay blinked, sure he had heard wrong. "You want me to—" "What?" Velra leaned closer. "You will act as my husband. For the next 7 days, nothing more." He shook his head. "You must be joking." "I'm not," she said. "I'm a noble woman from the house of Velra, and I must present a husband before the royal council, or I lose everything." Shay leaned back. "Why a human?" "You have your own kind." "I don't trust my own kind," she said, her eyes flashing. "They play games, and I don't have time for games." He stared at her, trying to read her face. "Why me?" "You're a soldier, you can follow orders, and you need credits," she answered. "And if I say no?" he asked. She didn't blink. "Then you'll walk out that door, and someone will follow you, and you'll never leave this station alive." He laughed nervously. "You're threatening me now?" "No," she said calmly. "I'm telling you the truth." He looked at the chip again, then back at her. "I just have to act like your husband?" "Yes," she nodded. "No real marriage, no touching unless required. Just act like you care." Shay sighed, rubbed his face, and made a decision. "Fine," he said. "I'm in." Velra stood up. "Good, come with me." They walked through the noisy crowd as they stepped onto her private ship. Shay noticed how clean and expensive everything looked. This was not just any noble woman, she had power. Inside, she handed him a data tablet. "Read this," she said. "Learn our story. How we met, where we kissed for the first time, and what my favorite flower is." He raised an eyebrow. "You're serious about this?" "I have to be," she replied. "If they catch a lie, I lose my house, my lands, and maybe my life." He sat and started reading. The story was well crafted, even romantic, but something felt off. There were no pictures of them together, no real proof of love, just words. Before he could ask, the ship landed. She looked at him, her voice low now. "From this moment, you are my husband." He nodded. Adjusting his jacket, the doors opened, and they stepped out. Dozens of alien nobles were waiting. A large crowd stared at them, some curious, some angry. Velra grabbed his arm and smiled like they were newly married. Shay followed her lead, smiling. "Back." Then a voice called out from the crowd. "Lady Velra, is this your chosen one?" She nodded. "Yes, this is Shay, my husband." Shay felt all eyes turned toward him. The alien council stepped forward. "Then you must show us proof of your union," one elder said. Shay looked at Velra, confused. Before he could speak, she turned, placed a hand on his face, and kissed him. The crowd gasped. Shay's heart pounded. It wasn't just a light kiss. It felt real, like she had done it before. When she pulled back, she whispered, "The act begins now." Shay had no idea what he had just stepped into, but it was too late to back out now. The lie had started, and the danger was already close. He smiled again, but inside he was full of questions. And one loud thought repeated in his head, "I should have said no." Shay stood beside Velra as the alien nobles watched with sharp eyes. The kiss still burned on his lips. He wasn't sure if it was real or just part of her perfect performance. The silver-robed judge stepped closer and stared at them both. "Love can be faked," he said slowly, "but true feelings show in the details." Velra didn't flinch. "Then test us," she said, her voice calm like steel. Shay blinked, wondering what kind of test she was asking for. The judge nodded. "You will attend the binding feast tonight. All royal couples must take part." Shay leaned slightly toward Velra and whispered, "What's that?" She whispered back, "It's a public dinner, full of questions, smiles, lies, and people trying to break us." He tried to laugh, but it came out dry. That evening, the palace glowed under alien moons. Velra wore a stunning silver dress, and Shay had been given royal clothes that itched his skin. He looked at himself in the mirror and felt like a fraud. He wasn't a noble, wasn't her real husband. And he sure wasn't used to being the center of attention. When they walked into the feast hall, all eyes turned to them. Shay smiled nervously. Velra held his arm with grace. They took their seats at the long table, surrounded by powerful aliens. With cold smiles, a noble woman with violet skin leaned forward and asked, "So Shay, what made you fall in love with Lady Velra?" Shay froze for a second, then remembered the story from the data tablet. He smiled and said, "It was the first time I saw her speak to a wounded child in the market. She gave the boy her food and walked away without saying her name." The table went quiet. Velra looked at him with surprise, but it was the kind that warmed her eyes. The noble woman leaned back, her expression unreadable. Then another voice came from across the table, deep and cold. It was Lord Trivan, a strong alien with armor on his shoulders. "She used to walk beside me," he said, his gaze locked on Velra. "Now she walks beside a human." Velra didn't blink. "You wore a crown but treated people like dirt. I wanted more than power." The words cut deep, and the room felt heavy with tension. Shay kept a straight face, but his hand under the table was tight. He had read Trivan's name in the data file, her ex-betrothed. Once promised by her father, the old noble still supported him in secret. Velra leaned close to Shay and whispered, "If he breaks our story, everything falls." The music played in the background, but the table had turned cold. Suddenly, the judge from before stood and said, "Let us test one final thing." He clapped his hands, and two alien servants brought a glowing sphere to the table. "This is a truth light," he explained. "Hold it together and speak of your love. If your feelings match your words, the light will remain steady. If not, it will flicker." Shay glanced at Velra, who nodded once. They both placed their hands on the sphere. It felt warm, almost alive. The judge spoke again. "Now, tell us your love story in your own words." Velra looked at Shay, her eyes softening. He took a deep breath. "I was nothing," he said, his voice calm. "Just a soldier without a home. Then I met her. She asked nothing of me at first, just offered tea in silence. The way she listened made me feel like I mattered. She didn't care that I was human, only that I was kind." As he spoke, the light stayed steady, Velra added. "He made me laugh when I had forgotten how. He didn't want my title, only my time. He reminded me I still had a heart." The room fell silent as the light glowed brighter. Even Trivan looked uneasy now. The judge nodded. "You may leave the table." Velra and Shay stood, walking toward the palace balcony. Outside, the stars burned bright in the night sky. Shay leaned on the rail and whispered, "That thing didn't just test truth, did it?" Velra shook her head. "No, it reads connection. If we hadn't connected during that kiss or during dinner, we would have been exposed." He looked at her confused. "So, are we connected now?" She looked away, her voice softer than before. "Maybe more than I planned." Before Shay could ask more, a small robotic bird flew toward them. It dropped a note in Velra's hand and flew off into the sky. She read it and her face turned pale. "What is it?" Shay asked. She folded the paper slowly. "They've moved the final vote to tomorrow morning. They're planning something." Shay stared at her. You think they're going to try and stop the marriage? Velra nodded. No, she said quietly. I think they're going to try and stop you. Shay looked up at the stars and felt something deep in his chest. This wasn't just a fake marriage anymore. Something real was forming, and something deadly was closing in. He had no idea who to trust, but he knew one thing. He wasn't walking away from this without a fight. Not now, not after that kiss, not after what he saw in her eyes. He didn't know it yet, but tomorrow nothing would be the same. The palace halls were quiet after midnight. Shay walked alone, his footsteps soft on the silver floors. He couldn't sleep, not after what Velra said. They're going to try and stop you. She had warned. That voice echoed in his head again. And again. He had been a soldier. He knew danger. He could smell it in the air now. But this was different. He wasn't facing a battlefield. He was walking through a trap. And he didn't even know where the wires were. His instincts pulled him toward the east wing of the palace. Velra's private quarters were guarded during the day, but now the doors were unguarded, unlocked and quiet. Too quiet. Shay hesitated, then stepped inside. The room was large, elegant, and dark. Alien symbols glowed faintly on the walls. A warm scent filled the air, something like burning leaves and flowers. He moved carefully, his eyes scanning every corner. He didn't come to spy. But something in his gut told him the truth was hiding here, on her desk. He saw a small box made of gold and glass. It pulsed softly with green light. Inside it, a hollow crystal. Still active, Shay glanced at the door, then picked it up. The moment his fingers touched it, the crystal glowed brighter. A voice played. It was Velra's, younger and full of fear. They killed my brother for refusing to join the old circle, the voice said. They said I must marry one of them, or follow him into the grave. Shay's hand tightened around the crystal. They want the bloodline, not me, the voice continued. That's why I need a fake husband, someone outside their reach. I need time to run, to disappear after the vote. Shay's heart beat faster. He thought she just wanted to protect her position, but now he saw the truth. She was never planning to stay after the marriage. She was planning to vanish, using him as cover. He turned off the crystal just as the door opened. Velra stood there, her eyes locked on the device in his hand. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she closed the door behind her and walked in slowly. You weren't supposed to see that, she said softly. Shay placed the crystal back in the box. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. Velra sighed and sat down on the edge of her bed. I thought you'd leave if you knew, she said. Were you going to just disappear after the wedding? He asked. I was going to leave, yes, she said, but I wasn't going to let you die. I had plans to get you out safely, too. Shay paced the room, hands on his hips. You dragged me into royal politics, put a target on my back, and you didn't think I deserved the full story? Velra stood up, her voice sharper now. You said yes for credits, not for truth. Shay turned to face her. That was before they tried to kill me at dinner. That was before your ex threatened me with his eyes. Velra stepped closer, her voice quiet again. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't expect you to play your role so well. I didn't expect to feel something real. Shay's anger slowed, replaced with confusion. You're saying this stopped being an act for you? Velra nodded. I didn't plan it. But when you spoke during the truth light, something changed. I felt safe for the first time in years. Shay looked at her, and for a moment, he forgot all the lies. But before he could speak, a noise came from the window, a flash of metal. Then silence. Shay pulled Velra down just as a small dart flew into the room. It hit the wall and melted into acid, burning through the surface. Assassin. He grabbed the emergency shield button beside the bed, activating the room's protection. Velra stared at the dart, her face pale. They've moved faster than I thought, she whispered. They don't want to wait for the vote. Shay checked the walls, the windows, every entry point. We need to move, he said. Now. But before they could take a step, a screen on the wall lit up. It showed a cloaked figure, face hidden by shadow, Lady Velra, the voice said, distorted and dark. You bring shame by standing with an outsider. You have until morning to undo this mistake, or we will correct it for you. The screen shut off. Velra stood frozen. Shay placed a hand on her shoulder. We don't have time to hide anymore. We face them together, or we die alone. She looked at him with wide eyes. You're still with me, even after what you saw? He gave a small smile. I signed up to be your fake husband, but now I'm ready to be your real partner in this fight. Velra stepped close, her voice shaking. Then let's make this marriage real, if only for survival, outside. The stars burned colder, and somewhere in the palace, someone loaded another dart. Morning would bring more than a vote. It would bring war. The palace was silent. But Shay could feel the danger in the walls. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding a small blade Velra had given him, not a gift, but a warning. She said no one inside this palace could be trusted. Velra stood at the window, her silver eyes fixed on the distant lights of the city below. The night was still, but their hearts were not. Neither of them had slept. Too many whispers in the halls, too many shadows behind smiling faces. They both knew the vote was a lie now. It wasn't about tradition or bloodlines anymore. It was about control, and they were in the way. A soft chime broke the silence. Someone was at the door. Velra looked at Shay, and he nodded. She walked slowly to the control panel and opened the security cam. The screen showed a servant girl, alone, carrying a tray of food. Shay narrowed his eyes. She wasn't assigned to us. Velra tapped a small button to scan her ID. No result. She's a fake, Velra said, stepping back. The door opened before they could lock it again. The girl walked in, her hands shaking. Slightly, forgive me, she said, bowing her head. I was sent to deliver this. Please eat before the vote. Velra didn't move. Shay stepped forward slowly, his voice calm. Who sent you? The girl's eyes darted to the corners of the room. Then, in a sudden move, she dropped the tray and pulled a small device from her sleeve. Shay moved fast, grabbing her wrist before she could press it. The device hit the floor and cracked open. Releasing a blue vapor, Velra slammed her palm on the emergency vent button, and the room hissed with air filters. The girl screamed and tried to run, but Shay pinned her to the wall. Who sent you? He shouted. She coughed, her voice broken. Trivan. He said if you die before the vote, no one would ask questions. Velra looked sick. Shay pushed the girl to the floor and activated the security lock. Guards would be there soon. The girl sobbed, whispering over and over, I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to ... Velra turned away, her face cold now. She whispered, this is what power looks like in this place. An hour later, the guards arrived and took the girl away. But the damage was done. Now Shay and Velra both knew they wouldn't make it to the vote without a fight. Velra led him down a hidden path through the palace walls. Old escape tunnels built during the war, forgotten by most. They reached a chamber deep underground, lit by ancient lights and filled with weapons. Velra touched a panel, and a screen flickered to life. A hologram of an older alien woman appeared, her voice trembling. If you're seeing this, Velra, it means the council has turned. It means Trivan has taken the old path again. I pray you remember who you are. The message ended, and Velra stood still. Shay watched her closely. Who was that? My mother, she whispered. She tried to stop them years ago. They erased her from history. She walked to the center of the room and picked up a sleek metal band. She placed it on her arm, and her dress changed. Morphing into armor, Shay raised an eyebrow, planning a wedding or a war. She gave him a small smile. Why not both? Then she tossed him a black vest, lightweight and glowing at the seams. Put it on, she said. You're not just my husband anymore, you're my shield. Shay slid into the vest and felt it hum with power. For the first time he didn't feel like an outsider in this world. He felt like he belonged beside her. Just then, the ground shook slightly, and the walls buzzed. Velra's voice dropped. They've locked the council chamber. They're going to hold the vote without U.S. Shay grabbed his blade. Then we break in. They moved fast through the tunnels. Shadows under the palace. Above them, the council gathered under golden lights. Trivan stood at the front, speaking with false pride. Velra has failed to. Up here, her marriage was a lie, he declared. He looked around, waiting for approval. The elders looked unsure. Whispers filled the air. Then the doors burst open. Smoke rolled in. And two figures stepped through, Velra in armor and Shay beside. Her gasps echoed through the chamber. Shay stepped forward, voice clear. "You want truth?" he shouted, then listened to her speak. Velra raised her hand and threw the broken poison device at Trivan's feet. "This is how he planned to win," she said. "By killing us before the vote." The room erupted into chaos. Guards moved forward, but others held them back. One of the elders stood, his voice shaking. "We must investigate this claim." Shay looked at Velra, her eyes bright with fury. This wasn't acting anymore. This was real, and everyone could feel it. She grabbed his hand and raised it in front of the crowd. "This is my husband," she said loudly. "Chosen by heart, not politics. And together, we will not be silenced." The vote was delayed, the room divided, but one thing was clear: Velra and Shay were no longer just pretending. They were fighting for each other now, and the galaxy was watching. The storm outside the palace had finally reached the sky above. Thunder rolled like the footsteps of giants, shaking the walls. Inside a quiet chamber lit by soft yellow lamps, Shay sat alone with a bandage around his arm. The blast from the council doors had cut him, but he didn't care. His eyes were fixed on the floor, heart still racing. Velra had gone to speak with the elders privately, she said. "Wait for me here, I'll only be a moment." But that moment had stretched into an hour. Shay didn't like waiting, not when. Every shadow felt like a knife. He looked around the room again. Thick curtains, an old painting, no windows, just one door. His hand rested on the hilt of his small blade, the one she gave him. It wasn't just a weapon now, it was a promise. The door opened slowly, and Velra entered. Her face calm but different. There was something behind her eyes, something heavy. He stood up quickly. "Are you okay?" She nodded but didn't smile. "I told them everything," she said, voice soft. "I told them I faked the marriage." Shay's chest tightened. He didn't speak, just waited. "I told them I hired you for protection, for survival, not love." She added. Shay stayed still, but the silence in the room was loud. "But then I told them what changed," Velra said, stepping closer. "I told them that somewhere between the lie and the danger, I started wishing it was real." Her eyes finally met his, and this time they didn't hide. Shay didn't speak for a moment, then said quietly, "You mean that?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't think it was possible. I spent my whole life building walls, lying to survive, faking smiles. But when you stood beside me in the council chamber, I felt something break." Shay stepped closer. The space between them disappearing. "You thought I'd run when I found the truth," he said. "I almost did." She tilted her head. "Why didn't you?" Shay gave a half smile. "Because for the first time in a long time, I wanted something more than credits." Velra looked down, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. She placed it on the table and activated it. A hologram of her brother appeared, young and laughing, standing beside her when she was just a girl. This was before they killed him. She said, her voice shaking, "He used to tell me one day, you'll find someone who chooses you even when you're hiding." She turned off the device and looked at Shay. I think he was right. Shay felt something rise in his chest, something warm and sharp at the same time. "I didn't come here to fall in love," he said. "But I can't lie to myself anymore. I don't want to pretend to be your husband. I want to be one." Velra stared at him like she wasn't sure if he was joking. Then her lips curved into the smallest, realest smile he had seen from her yet. Before she could answer, a voice echoed through the room from a hidden speaker. "All nobles must report to the Grand Hall. The final vote begins in 1 hour." Shay's smile faded. 1 hour, he repeated. Velra nodded. her face hardening again. "This is our last chance," she said. Shay grabbed his blade and vest. "Then let's finish it together." They stepped out of the quiet chamber into the bright hallway where guards stood stiff like statues. But this time, they didn't feel small. This time, they walked like they belonged. News had already spread across the station about the fake marriage. The attack, the truth exposed, but it didn't matter now, because what started as a job had become something real, and no one, not Trivan, not the elders, not the crown, could twist that truth. As they walked, a young alien servant ran to Velra and handed her a sealed note. She read it quickly, then froze. Shay saw her hand tighten. "What is it?" She looked at him, her voice low. "It's not just about the vote anymore. They're planning to arrest you during the ceremony." Shay's jaw clenched. "Let them try." But Velra shook her head. "No," she said. "I'm going to stop it before they even get the chance." Shay raised an eyebrow. "How?" Velra stepped closer and whispered something in his ear. Shay's eyes widened. "You're serious?" She nodded. "It's the only way to protect you and keep my house." "You'll hate it," he chuckled. "I'm already used to that," Velra leaned in, her forehead resting against his for one short moment. "Don't let go," she whispered. "I won't," he whispered back, and then they walked toward the final vote. Together, 1 hour left, one last lie to kill, one last truth to show, and behind every polite smile in that hall, someone was waiting to betray them, but they were ready now, more than actors, more than pawns. They were partners, and soon everyone would see it. Asterisk. The grand hall had never been this full. Velra walked in first, her silver eyes calm, her face unreadable. Shay followed behind her, dressed in black ceremonial robes, the collar too tight, the silence too loud. Rows of nobles sat in high seats, robes shining, faces hard and watching. Drums echoed slowly from above, counting down the last hour before the vote. Every beat sounded like a warning. Velra and Shay stopped at the center platform. Beneath the eye of the council, High Judge Relvek stood with his hands behind his back, his eyes scanning every move. Beside him stood Trivan, tall and proud, the old promise of power still burning in his stare. Velra didn't flinch, didn't blink. The judge raised a hand and the drums stopped. "Lady Velra," he said, "you requested one final act before the vote." "I did," she said, her voice clear. "I wish to perform the ancient bond with my husband." Gasps moved through the crowd like wind in tall grass. The ancient bond was real. Dangerous and binding, a ritual not performed in over a century. It joined two souls through energy and blood. No lies could survive inside it. Shay didn't understand all of it, but he knew enough. This wasn't just a risk. It was a promise made in front of all eyes, and if it failed, he would die. Velra turned toward him, her voice suddenly quiet. "This is how I stop them from arresting you," she whispered. "Once we're bonded, no law can separate us." He looked at her, heart pounding. "You sure about this?" he asked. She nodded. "You?" He didn't answer. He just stepped forward and took her hands. The judge frowned but signaled the keeper. An old alien priest walked forward, carrying a glowing bowl. He handed Shay a ceremonial blade. "Cut your palm," he said. "Only those willing to suffer can share a bond." Shay looked at Velra one last time, then sliced across his hand without a sound. She did the same, her blood glowing softly like starlight. They pressed their hands together. Over the bowl, blood mixing, light rising. A soft hum filled the room, then a sharp pulse. Everyone went silent as the energy surrounded them, wrapping them in gold and violet light. Shay felt warmth, not just on his skin, but deep in his chest. He could feel her. Her fear, her fire, her hope. She felt him too, his scars, his loyalty, his need to belong. The energy pulsed again, then faded, and the bond was sealed. They were now husband and wife by ancient law, and no one could undo it without tearing the council apart. But just as the hall filled with murmurs, Trivan stepped forward. "This changes nothing," he said sharply. "You still lied to us." She chose a human to protect her power. The judge raised his hand. Silence. Then he turned to Velra. We will now vote. As he opened the scroll to begin, a sudden blast shook the ground. The windows shattered inwards, and a wave of heat rushed through the chamber. Screams filled the air as smoke poured from the side wall. Velra grabbed Shay's arm and pulled him down, covering his body with her own. Blaster shots rang out. Guards turned. Chaos erupted. 3 masked attackers stormed into the hall, weapons drawn. One of them aimed straight at Shay. Velra moved fast too. Fast, she stood in front of him, arms wide, and the bolt hit her square in the chest. She collapsed into Shay's arms, her body heavy, her eyes wide in shock. No, he whispered. No, no, no. The guards finally reacted, bringing down the attackers. But it was too late. Shay held her, the glowing blood spreading across her robe. Stay with me, he said, holding her tight. Her fingers trembled as she touched his face. I'm sorry, she whispered. This wasn't supposed to happen. You were supposed to be safe. Tears burned his eyes, but he didn't let them fall. You saved me, he said. But I didn't want saving. I wanted you. The council hall burned behind them, alarms screaming, nobles running. But Shay stayed with her. And then, the impossible happened. Her blood glowed brighter, rising like threads of fire into the air. The bond pulsed again, stronger than before, and her body jerked as light spread across her skin. She gasped and coughed, her eyes wide with sudden breath. The bond wasn't just a ritual, it was a shield. It had saved her. Velra opened her eyes fully and looked at him. He held her tighter, whispering, You're okay. She nodded weakly. I think the bond protected me. The judge ran to them, shocked and breathless. No one has survived a strike like that, he said. What kind of bond did you create? Shay looked up, his face hard now. The real kind, he said. Not built on lies, not paid for, not forced. Real. The council went silent again, and this time, it wasn't because of fear. It was because they had just witnessed something. They couldn't explain something powerful, something human, and Velra, still weak, leaned into Shay and whispered, If we survive this vote, we don't have to pretend ever again. Shay closed his eyes for a second, then smiled. Good, he said, because I don't think I remember how to lie anymore. The light in the grand hall had changed. Smoke still drifted through the broken glass windows. The floor was scattered with pieces of shattered stone and torn robes, but at the center of it all stood Shay, holding Velra upright, her chest still. Glowed where the ancient bond had saved her. No one spoke, not even Trivan. They had all seen it, how she shielded him with her body, how the bond had come alive and pulled her back from death. The elders looked shaken, like children who had just witnessed real power for the first time. Velra took one breath, then another, stronger this time. She turned to the council and raised her voice. No more games, she said. No more lies. I didn't choose Shay to trick you. I chose him because I was tired of pretending. Shay stepped forward, his voice steady but firm. You wanted to vote on our marriage, he said. But we already made our choice. We stood in front of your truth light, we bled for your bond, and we nearly died here. If that's not real, then nothing ever was. An elder slowly stood from the high seat, her voice old and careful. I was against this union, she said. I believed it was fake. But I saw her fall, and I saw him stay. I saw the bond wake up to protect them. She looked around the room. Let this be recorded. The vote is unnecessary. The marriage stands. A ripple moved through the crowd, shock. Then whispers, then slow, respectful nods. Trivan stepped forward, trying to speak, but the judge raised a hand. This council is over, the judge declared. The vote is closed. Anyone who acts against this marriage now will be treated as a traitor. Shay let out a slow breath, his muscles finally relaxing. Velra leaned into him, and he caught her without effort. You did it, he whispered. No, she said softly. We did it. The guards began clearing the hall, nobles leaving with quiet footsteps. The flames had been put out. The walls would be rebuilt. But something bigger had changed, something permanent. They walked slowly back to her chambers. 2 guards at their side, but no longer needed. Inside, the lights were low, the silence gentle. Shay helped her sit on the couch, his hand still wrapped in hers. For the first time since they met, there were no lies between them, no script, no roles, no plan. Just 2 people who had been thrown into a storm, and somehow survived it. Velra looked at him with a tired smile. "I hired you for protection," she said. "Now I don't want to let you go." Shay sat beside her, brushing a lock of hair from her cheek. "You hired me for 1 week," he said. "But I'll stay for as long as you want," she laughed. Softly, "Be careful," she said. "I might want forever." He leaned closer, their foreheads touching gently. "I think I already do," he whispered. The bond between them pulsed again. Just once, like it was listening, outside the window. The stars turned slowly in the black sky. A new day had begun, but for them, it felt like something greater. She was no longer just a noble woman running from danger, and he was no longer just a human playing a part. They were partners, real ones, chosen not by tradition, not by law, not by bloodline, but by trust, sacrifice, and something stronger than fear, something that didn't need a vote, something that couldn't be faked. And in the quiet of that last night, with no more secrets between them, the woman who had once paid a stranger to be her husband now held his hand, not because she had to, but because she wanted nothing else. And the man who had once accepted credits for pretending now kissed her softly, knowing he had never meant anything more in his life. They didn't need to say, "I love you," because everything that had tried to kill them had already said it. For them, and the stars outside kept moving, but for the first time, they felt still.